You're listening to the Mitten Channel, Michigan Stories, Michigan Voices.
Hello everyone, this is Arthur Busch and welcome to Radio Free Flint, a production of the Mitten Channel. Today's guest is a name many of you will recognize. Paul Staroba, proud Flint native, St. Matt's athlete, University of Michigan standout, and a former NFL wide receiver and punter. Paul's story is the classic Flint narrative, grit, discipline, family, and community shaping a young kid into a Big Ten star and an NFL professional. From empty lot football games on the east side of Flint to catching touchdowns in the big house, from leading the conference in receptions to battling through the pressures of the pros, Paul's journey is truly remarkable. We're going to talk about the coaches who shaped him, what it was really like to play for Bo Schembechler, how he found success at every level of the game, and how growing up in Flint stayed with him throughout his entire life. You can listen to all our episodes and explore more Flint stories at themittenchannel.com or radiofreeflint.media. Now, let's get into it. My conversation with Flint's own Paul Staroba.
Dr. Mona knew that the water was bad. She gathered all the research that she had. She released a study. That study said...
Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Art.
I want to know who your favorite coach was of all the coaches you had. You had three great coaches. Let me see if I can remember who they are. Number one was Jack Pratt. Number two was Bump Elliott, someplace in there.
Yep.
And number three was Bo Schembechler.
Jack Pratt, I can tell you stories about that man. He was an incredible human being to start with. He's the one that got me believing that coming from a small Class D school that I could actually play football on the big-time level. And because nobody ever recruited Class D schools. Jack used to take us all down to Michigan Stadium for the Michigan spring game. And he would drag, and this was very informal back in those days. He would take me and he'd drag me down by the tunnel. This, I swear to God, this is the honest God truth. He'd stand there with me as the players are walking out onto the field. He'd hit me with his elbow and say, hey, look at that guy. He says, you're as big as him. And he says, you can run faster. That's the kind of things he did to me. I'll tell you another story, too. We went down to see a Baltimore Colts and Detroit Lions in an exhibition game in Old Tiger Stadium. And we're all sitting there. During the game, he comes over to me and he leans over and whispers in my ear. He goes, someday we're going to come down here and watch you. And those are those honest-to-God stories that he did. And there's some other stuff, too. But he was getting me to believe that I could do it on that level because it seems so... You know, when we're little kids, we look up to these guys, they seem like gods and they seem like you'll never get there. But he made them seem very real to me, very touchable.
He was amazing. Now, where did you encounter Jack at?
Well, actually, when I went to St. Leo's in 8th grade, his brother-in-law, Jack Etchew, was our 8th grade coach. So we had a connection with Pratt. And then our St. Leo's class, we were actually in the St. Mary's school district. But St. Mary's couldn't take our whole St. Leo's class. It didn't have enough room for it. And they wanted to keep us all together. And I thought that was a great idea. St. Matt's was the only one that could take all of us. There were only like 20 of us in the St. Leo's class, 8th grade. And so we all went down to St. Matt's. Jack Etchew, I was a quarterback back in 8th grade. Jack Pratt would come and watch his brother-in-law, Jack Etchew, the games on Saturday. We'd play at Whaley Field. Or we play over to over Potter in those areas. So, but they were 8th grade games. They weren't big time games. But that was actually the first time I ever played organized football. The difference was I had 3 older brothers, so I played a lot of football, but not organized.
You played in the empty lots wherever it could be had.
Wherever. With Potter School, we had a big side lot next to our house, and we would play there. We had all boys in our neighborhood. So every day was the morning till night was sports every single day of the week. Much probably like your neighborhood.
Exactly. That's exactly what we did. We even played the annual Thanksgiving Day game with snow or without snow in the empty lot there at Penn Galley and Milton Drive.
Well, we used to go out to George Daly, Richfield and Genesee on the weekends, climb the fence into the field, and there'd be 40 or 50 guys playing football on the field, which was the old original Kersley High School varsity field until they built the other school and built the field.
And
Maybe
then
40, 50 guys. I had 3 older brothers, so I learned a lot of competitiveness. If I wanted to play with them, I had to play up to their level. Otherwise, I wasn't in. My older brothers, this is funny how when we were playing in the neighborhood, if somebody in the neighborhood roughed me up, then they had to deal with my brothers. But if my brothers roughed me up, it was no big deal. I was their property.
Well, somehow or another, from the fields of George Daly Field, you ended up in the Greater Flint Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame. Tell me about that a little.
Well, again, going back to the coaching, Jack Pratt was a major influence, and I went to Michigan because I always looked at, and I didn't go on scholarship. I was basically like a walk-on, but he had me believing I could play big football. And so I just said, well, if I don't have I paid my first year through, got a scholarship my second year. My career at St. Matthews, we had great teams. We had great teammates. We had great coaching. The old Flint area parochial conference was a great conference. All small schools, everybody knew one another because we would play sports, basketball, different things in the summer. Each school would have dances, so you got to know the other guys. So we had a lot of competitive guys there. So, that always raises your level and ability when you're playing against good competition. And then, going to Michigan, playing with Bo, and to fit in perfectly. We had the right offense, we had the right guys, and so you do what you do, and you do it to the best of your ability. And getting into the Flint Sports Hall of Fame was a result of all that kind of stuff. If I didn't have all those things around me, but I had a lot of great people.
Yeah, no kidding. There's a lot of great people in the Flint Sports Hall of Fame. And things that I had a question about with you is, what was it like to catch a touchdown in the big house?
I'll never forget my first one. It was against Illinois. And, you always dream of it. And then you finally, it happens. It kind of surprised me that I actually scored a touchdown. And back in those days, you could throw the ball in the stands or whatever you want to do. I remember I caught it, and I was so excited. I turned around, I was throwing the ball into the stands. And when I threw it, my foot slipped, and I fell flat on my face. So, I didn't make a very good production out of that issue. Be in front of your hometown fans, because when you're there, you get a lot of cheering. But when you're in a foreign territory, nobody, it's pretty quiet. But your teammates are there to spur you on.
You played ball and attended parochial schools in the Flint area. And who were some of your teammates when you were at St. Matt?
Well, Mike Abbott, whose son is Jim Abbott, the world-renowned, unbelievable human being to start with. Kind and good a person as you can ever run across. And, a little story on that is, here we are, high school senior. As soon as we're out of school, Kathy, his wife, gives birth. And we get the message that their son was born with one hand. We were devastated. We're high school kids. We didn't understand birth defects and things like that. And as his, great parents, Mike and Kathy Abbott, they raised him the right way, obviously. He's a world hero, let's face it. To do what he's done and the things he does so much stuff on the side nobody ever realized. When he visits kids, that he gets letters from parents, and I've seen some of the letters that they bring tears to your eyes, because they're devastated their son maybe was born without a right arm, something like that. And Jim will write them. He's actually stopped in to see people when he's had an opportunity. And that's the kind of person he is. And the biggest, I tell you, when he played in the Olympic, I'll never forget it. I was up north. And I was at a friend's cottage, and we turned the Olympics on for the opening ceremony. And who's carrying the flag? Jim Abbott. It brought tears to my eyes. Still does. And I think, you can't get a bigger honor to carry your country's flag, the opening ceremony, the Olympics. It's everybody in the world is watching, but the people that are your teammates on the Olympic team put you in that position. That's what kind of person he is. And we had John Spurla on our team, who, he still holds the record for most points scored in high school basketball tournament, the games for the tournament, the year after. He was a year younger. That's what John's all-state football, basketball. John became a lawyer out of Notre Dame, very, very successful lawyer in Grand Rapids. John would work you to death. There was nobody who was tougher than John Spurl. He was the toughest guy going. He wasn't the biggest guy going, but he was the toughest. And, he was a leader, just the way he conducted himself. And, it was easy to get us to follow a lot, but whatever effort he gave, we had to give too. The other schools like Flint Central, you look at the guys they had, Tim Bograkis, Paul Stokes, Dwight Penix, Phils Bacon, they had one of the greatest basketball teams you'll ever see. And all the Flint schools had really great teams.
When you were a kid, did you participate in punt, pass, and kick?
That was after I was actually a little older.
Did you ever play at Atwood Stadium?
Played baseball there. Well, yeah, actually, we played football there too because St. Mike's and St. Matt's played their opening game at Atwood Stadium. My very first game as a freshman at St. Matthews, we played St. Mike's and just got drilled. And Coach Pratt was not happy with the effort, so practice was not any fun for them.
There's a lot of people don't remember baseball at Atwood Stadium.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And did you say you played baseball for your St. Matt's team? Or
no, this was the old leagues that they used to have class C, D, E, and that.
Okay.
The city playoffs, and our whole goal was to get to Atwood Stadium to play.
Right.
It's the first time we ever played in anything that had real true stands around.
When you were a kid, did you learn how to drop kick the ball?
Yeah, we used to drop kick it for fun. But the way I really learned how to kick, because I also kicked off, and I could kick extra points and field goals too. But in our side yard, the telephone lines ran down the log, perpendicular to the length of the field, and so we'd go out there, we'd kick it over the telephone wires all the time. And then my dad and I he'd get on one side of the house and I'd get on the other side of the house, and we'd punt the ball back and forth.
Uh-oh.
And it was great for learning how to catch it because you had to, you didn't see the ball till it got above the house. And so I learned to catch like that. But also I learned how to punt to get it good and high. And that lasted until, I can't remember if it was my dad or myself, hit one of the guide wires on the TV antenna, and it went down. And my mom came out and said, "You guys are done. You go over in the other lot if you want to kick the balls." That's how I learned to punt.
Whatever you learned, did you well, because you led the Big Ten in punting with a 41.5 yard average.
Yep.
And that you received a fair amount of accolades for your punting. Is that right?
Yeah. It was. I led the Big Ten in punting. Nationally, the guys who always led the nation in punting were from like Utah or Wyoming, where they had a lot thinner air. And that's the honest to God truth. They had a little bit thinner air and the ball would travel a little farther. But it was a great asset to have. It made you more valuable to the team. The only trouble was back in those days, you didn't stand on the sidelines and warm up. I mean, I was playing, so I would, we'd have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 play series, and you'd be running downfield. And so, if you didn't make a first down, it's come back, and then you're punting the next play, and you're gassed. And so it was, I'd come to the huddle, and I'd be gasping for air. And all I would tell the guys, just hit somebody. Just make sure you hit them so I could get the punt off. Never had a punt blocked. Nope.
Did the coach ever call your number to pass the ball down the field?
No, he never asked me to do that, thank God.
He was kind of a conservative fellow and stuff like that, wasn't he?
Yep. We had, I wasn't punting at the time, but yeah, I mean, things in Bo's craw for a long time. When we were juniors, we lost to Missouri, like 40-14 or something like that. And the turning point in the game was we had a punt returned against him. Oh, Bo, he never let up on that. I mean, he was the rest of the season, every time during the week when we're working on punt protection, I mean, he would throw 40 guys on the other side and say, "Go block the punt. I'll buy somebody a steak dinner."
So you eventually ended up under the tutelage of Bo Schembechler, the infamous or famous legendary coach at the University of Michigan. So what happened in your career there? In those days, you couldn't play the first year.
Right. My freshman year, I didn't play. And sophomore year was Bump Elliott. And Bump Elliott was a great man. So, he true Michigan man. I mean, he and his brother were All-Americans at Michigan. Bump, it was a legend. And he was our coach. Bump never swore. He never said a cuss word. Of course, when Bo got there, every other word was MFSOB. And we're like in shock. Who is this guy? And he's kicking our butts every day. Winter conditioning was the first experience we really had with Bo, and it was absolute torture. He would make sure that on Saturday mornings, 8 o'clock, we'd have conditioning. You know why that was? Because he knew we were out Friday night. And so we'd show up there and everybody's just struggling. Then when we had spring practice, that's where the old saying, "Those who stay will be champions." And we figured out why that was. It's because we were having guys walk off the field during practice because they couldn't take it, because we were hitting every single day. It really toughened you up. Bo was separating who was going to put out and who wasn't. And he found out real fast because we had a lot of guys quit. Most of them were academic guys anyway. I mean, they were, really smart guys, great teammates, but they were smart guys. Say, I don't need this. I don't need to be put through this torture. And Bo even said years later, he said, you guys, he says, I was never harder on a team than I was at you. He said, well, thanks. That's great to hear now.
Eventually, you worked your way into the lineup.
Yep.
How did it go after that? After that first year, that would have been what, your sophomore or junior?
That would have been my junior. Junior year, I started out great. And then I ran into some problems because I would have had a lot more receptions. I injured my thumb, and so that kind of like distracted. And I dropped a couple balls, and Bo pulled me. And then I'll say it, I had a bad attitude about the whole thing. I was not real happy about it. After that season was over, I made up my mind. In fact, Coach Jim Young was he was our defensive coordinator. He came to me, and he gave me a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And he said, I want you to read this. He said, learn what's in this book. He said, it'll help you tremendously. And basically all it boils down to is visualizing everything you want to do. Like in any profession, you can visualize it. As a lawyer, you look and say, well, this is what results I want, and I need to do this, this, and this. So I took that to heart, and you learn one thing is that every single time you catch the ball, you got to look it into your hand, because otherwise you'll develop bad habits. And in your mind, sometimes you just close your eyes and pretend like you're running routes and the ball's coming. But Jim Young was a big instrumental part of that, giving me that book, because I did that over and over and over all summer long, and it really helped my concentration. And so I had very happy with my seniors.
Now, you led the Big Ten in receptions with 35 pass catches for 519 yards. Were you Big Ten, all Big Ten for that, or for punter?
No, as a receiver.
Did they have slot receivers in those days, or were they all just wide out?
Very little. I mean, actually, they call it, I was all Big Ten split end. Didn't do much slot. We didn't have much. I would love to have played in the offenses today, because they're so unbelievably tricky. And back then, 35 receptions, that's a lot of receptions in some ways, but it's what these guys catch nowadays. I would have loved to have, guys catching 60, 70 passes a season. That'd have been fun.
Was your team successful that year, or how did it?
Yeah, that's the year that we beat Ohio State when Woody had his greatest team, his first year. When the year before, when we were sophomores, and we were down to Columbus, it was 50-14 when Woody went for 2 points at the end of the game. Didn't settle well with guys because he was just trying to embarrass them.
When you were playing at the University of Michigan, what's it like to be a football player and a student?
Back in those days, that was during the Vietnam War. So, we weren't such big hot shots on the campus. Like nowadays, social media has really blown these guys up to be bigger and we only had 1 or 2 games a season on TV. And the only time that, a lot of the students, they loved football, they loved going in there. But, there wasn't a lot of publicity on it. Flint Journal was a great newspaper in its day, because they covered the local sports, high schools, they covered the city sports, recreational league, and they covered the Big Ten and the Lions. They did a great job in it. Doug Mintline, Len Hoyes, and those guys, great writers.
In your career at Michigan, which was extraordinarily successful, you made All-League, had some big numbers, and that drew the attention of the No Fools League, right?
Yeah, right.
The NFL.
Right.
Did you ever think when you were growing up in the city of Flint that you'd end up in the NFL draft?
No, that was the farthest thing from my mind. I had no idea what it was even about.
So, like my friend Reggie Williams, you were drafted in the 3rd round.
Yep.
You were picked by, I think, the Cleveland Browns, right?
Right.
And how'd that go the first year?
I ended up on the taxi squad the first year. Like they say, the difference between high school and college is the speed. The difference between college and pros is the speed. So you started learning how to deal with that speed that's for you and against you. I was pretty fast, but everybody's fast. So you had to learn how to, you had to be more of a precise player. You had to run your routes correctly, do, everything you could do. Actually, when I went to Cleveland, I actually tried to lose some weight so I could be a little bit quicker. Speed is, so as they say, speed kills. And that's when you see these guys in the league that, run 4.3 and 4.4 40s. That's world class.
Eventually you made it onto the field,
Yep.
but not at Cleveland?
No, I played at Cleveland. It was Mike Phipps and Brian Sipe was the backup. And Brian and I became great friends, still are to this day. Now we had guys like Fair Hooker, Gary Collins, Leroy Kelly, Bo Scott. There were some great players on that team. I was pretty well in awe of these guys. Gene Hickerson, Ben Davis. We had a chance to beat the Miami Dolphins in a playoff game. This is my second year when they went undefeated. We went down there to play them in the playoffs. And right towards the end of the game, I can't remember what the situation was. We had an awesome chance of actually beating them, which would have ended their, unbeaten streak. But we didn't, and they went on to legendary status.
And then eventually you played for the Redskins and the Green Bay Packers.
Yep. I didn't play. I was just with the Redskins just during the preseason, and I was picked up at the end of the season by Green Bay because their punter, Ron Whidbey, had gotten hurt. And they needed a punter, so I went up to Green Bay the last few games of the season. That was quite an experience because it was already winter, full-fledged winter up there when I got there. And I actually punted. Last game of the season was against the Chicago Bears, and it was funny because I was getting the snap from the center. We're in Soldier Field, and it's snowing out, and the ball bounces back to me. And I pick it up, and I look, and there's like 8 black jerseys like bearing down on me. So I went up like I was going to punt it, and they all jumped, and I ran around the guys for a first down. What was funny is a friend of mine who was injured was up in the press box. I named Charlie Hall. He was up there, and he said the coach, when I took off running, the coach is screaming at me like, "You stupid SOB, what are you doing?" When I got the first down, the next word out of his mouth was, "Great run." That changed his words right in mid-sentence.
Who was the head coach at that time?
Dan Devine. I could go into stories about him.
That year had sort of an unceremonious ending, didn't it? Your career ended in Green Bay, I believe.
Yes.
Not everybody's career ends quite like that. You and Colin Kaepernick might be in the same category, right?
Well, kind of. That was during the 75 player strike.
And then your True Flintstone came out and on the national stage.
Yeah, I stayed on strike. I stayed on strike. Didn't help my career. And actually, when I look back, I'm glad I did because, I got back to Flint. My father-in-law hired me. I had 35 great years in the beer business, raised 5 kids and everything, but it helped get me on my way to, where I ended up today.
I would have never guessed in a million years that you had actually been arrested for picketing in Green Bay.
Let me tell you the whole story on that. That was during the strike, and we were picketing with some Chicago Bears. It was an exhibition game. The exhibition game, the funds went to the policeman's pension fund. So we're out there, we're picketing. The team has an injunction put against us for picketing. And one of the guys was a lawyer. I can't remember who it was. One of the guys was a lawyer that played on the team. He had actually had his law degree. And he said, "We're not going anywhere." So they bring a paddy wagon to make us leave. My wife is pregnant for our first daughter, Jennifer. And she had just taken the ferry across from Ludington over to Manitowoc. And it's 90 degrees out. She's like 7 months pregnant. And she gets to the stadium just as we're being loaded in. She knows nothing about what's going on. And we're getting put into the paddy wagon. And I see her out there, and there's a little window. And I laugh. I see her. She's got tears coming down her eyes. I'm waving out the little window to her. She has no idea what's going on. She doesn't know anybody there. Then she has to find out, they take us to the police station. That was all. It was all kind of a farce. They just wanted us out of there. They have an injunction put against us, and they bail us out. We went into the police station. It was kind of funny because Gail Gillingham, who was a big, monstrous guy, great player, blocked for Paul Horning and Jim Taylor. He's looking at these cops, and because this game money went towards their pension fund, and he's yelling at these cops, and everybody knows it's just sarcastic. And he says, you guys, he says, "I tore my knee up playing in this game last year, and you guys have the nerve to arrest me." And he picks up his forearm and kind of flexes his forearm muscles, which were like my leg. "See this?" He's pointing to the cops, says, "You see this? You're going to have to face it." Makes the atomic bomb look like a church social. And we're all, cops are laughing. Just went on. But that was the episode of being arrested.
What was it about Flint that lent to you the tools to become successful? We got less than.
Yeah, I think, growing up in Flint, I grew up over in the east side, right by AC Delco, Delphi, all the changes that went. And all my family worked in General Motors at one time or another. My mother retired from there. My brothers retired from there. My father was a sheet metal worker. And I think growing up in Flint, we didn't have a lot. We had enough to get by on. But, you learn your friends that I have in Flint, I still have. I think it's the closest to people of Flint because everybody came from the same background. It was a great town back in those days. You could go anywhere in town, go to Ballinger Park, play basketball on Sundays with all the guys from the city. That's where you got a lot better.
Well, thank you, Paul. And we're out of time. I hope you get a chance to come back. This is Radio Free Flint. And as they say in the space program, we're over and out. Paul, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Art. Appreciate it very much.
Episode of Radio Free Flint, produced by the Mitten channel. A big thank you to Paul Staroba for sharing his stories from Michigan Stadium to the NFL to his roots right here in Flint. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow us on YouTube and Facebook, leave a review, and check out the full archive of the mittenchannel.com and radiofreeflint.media. Your support and even small monthly contribution helps us continue capturing and preserving the stories of Flint and the people who define our region. Thanks for listening. I'm Arthur Busch. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of Flint.